educator fresh. Last time we were talking about histology and we stopped on glandular epithelium. Just a quick recap. Last time we talked about the simple squamous epithelium and we talked about the different types of epithelium. If you didn't watch that video, please you can go back and watch that video. It will be left in a link below. We also talked about the compound epithelium, and today we want to focus our energy on glandular epithelium. So glandular epithelium is formed by epithelial cells which are frequently interspersed with secretory cells. For example, the goblet cells or the aggregates of glandular cells that form multicellular glands. So what happens is some glands can be unicellular, like the goblet cells, and some glands can be multicellular. So on this side here we have the unicellular glands. This is an example of a goblet cell. It is one cell, but then they can also be multicellular. In other words, that is a gland that is made up of very many cells aggregated together to do one function. For example, the salivary glands. Glands can be simple or they can be compound. Glands can be exocrine. To be exocrine means they secrete their secretions, and the secretions are delivered to the surface via ducts. And then the endocrine glands are glands which have their secretions released and passed into the bloodstream. And these ones are famously called ductless glands. So these ones, this is how we classify them if we are basing on how they are, what they secrete. When we are basing on what they secrete, we can either have the merocrine glands. Let me get there very fast, yes. So basing on what they secrete, we can have the merocrine glands, and here the secretions are produced simply by cells, and then, for example, the goblet cells, the pancreatic glands, and the sweat glands. And then we can have the apocrine glands. In the apocrine glands, the glandular epithelium is shed. So you can see here, we have part of the cell breaking off by the top part of the cell, and that part which breaks off has the secretion, for example, in the mammary glands. This explains why they tell us that when a child is breastfeeding, the mother passes on some antibodies to the child via the breastfeeding. This is because the type of secretion for the mammary glands is such that anytime the child is breastfeeding, part of the cells of the mammary glands actually break off. And then we have holocrine glands. So in holocrine glands, the whole secretory cell disintegrates and the secretions are from the epithelium. A good example are the sebaceous glands of the mammalian skin. And here, an epithelium containing the goblet cells is called a mucous membrane. And then we have very many multicellular exocrine glands that exist in different forms. So this is how they are classified if we are classifying them depending on how they secrete. So we have the merocrine, where the secretions are produced by cells, and then we have the apocrine, where the secretions involve the top part breaking away, and the holocrine, where the whole cell disintegrates. But we can actually classify them depending on their shape. So here we have the simple tubular. This is the simple tubular found in the intestines, the simple tubular, and this type is found in the crypts of Libacune in the walls of the mammalian intestine. So this is the type of gland where it looks tubular. And then we have the simple alveolar. The simple alveolar, so we can label this part. The top part is the surface epithelium. This is the neck. This one does not secrete anything. It's just the duct. And then we have this downer part, which is a bit circular. That is actually the secretory part of the gland. So the simple circular glands are found in the mucous glands of the skin, of the frog, and even other amphibian. We have the simple coiled tubular. For example, the sweat glands. This is the simple coil. Now, this is an oversimplification, but it can be coiled more than this. And in the simple coiled tubular, we have the secretory part coiling up to form actually a more longer tube, but that is coiled within itself. And then tubular can also be branched. This is still under simple, and we have a good example of this being the gastric glands. And this is also another example of the simple branched but circular. So we had the simple circular, where it was just one round circular form, And now we are having the branched forms. So this is the branched for simple circular glands. Then we have compound glands. For example, we have the compound circular glands. This one is found in the submaxillary and the sublingual salivary glands. Here we have the same setup like here, but imagine this but on a larger and a grander scale, and this is what is happening here. So we have very many of these having the shape and of the circular gland, but being on the same, having the same opening where they release their duct. So for example, these are found in the part of the pancreas which secretes digestive enzymes, and in the mammary glands. This is where we find the compound circular glands. And then we have the compound tubular. The compound tubular glands are found in the mammary glands and the Cowper's glands, and also in the salivary glands. I didn't talk about where we find the branched tubular glands. The simple branched tubular glands are found in the Brunner glands, and even in the mammalian small intestine, and in the gastric glands of the stomach. So yeah, you would do well to note that. We find this, we talked about this one. It's also found in the crypts of Lieberkühn. And there are more. We can talk about the compound circular, we can talk about the simple branch circular, which is found in the sebaceous gland, and so on and so forth. I already said glands can be divided depending on whether they have ducts or not. When they have ducts, they are called exocrine, and when they have no ducts, they are called endocrine glands. So the examples of exocrine glands, we have the salivary glands, the mammary glands, the pancreatic gland, the pancreas, and then under the endocrine glands, we have a whole lot of different glands, the thymus glands, the pituitary glands, the adrenal glands, and so on and so forth. I believe I will make a video separate about that. So let's talk about connective tissue. But before we talk about connective tissue, let's talk about the functions of the glands, just in case you were not with us, the functions of epithelial tissue. I talked about them in the first video, but I believe it's quite important to talk about them even now. The first one is protection. Because epithelial tissue are found lying on top of surfaces, they have the function of serving as a barrier. So they protect underlying tissue from injuries by chemicals, pressure, abrasion, infection. So for example, your skin. And then secretion, we have just talked about glands here. One of their purposes is secretion, like the sebaceous glands, salivary glands, the pancreas. All of those are epithelial tissue which have the purpose of excretion, secretion. And then we have excretion, for example, the sweat glands, which have the purpose of excretion by removing excess water, excess salts, and the likes. And then we have absorption. We saw the cuboidal and the columnar epithelium, which we are modified for absorption. And then we have exchange of materials. For example, in the squamous epithelium of the alveoli, where we have gaseous exchange. And then because the squamous epithelium is flattened, it is extremely flattened and it's extremely thin. This gives it a large diffusion distance, sorry, a very large surface area and a very short diffusion distance, which supports efficient exchange of materials. And then they have the purpose of sensing. Because they are found on the surfaces of the body, they have the purpose of sensing the changes in the environment. For example, on the skin, they must have hairs. If they are keratinized in the stomach, they are going to have those receptor cells which can communicate with other cells for cell-to-cell communication. And then finally, we have movement of materials. Epithelia may be modified to aid movement of materials. For example, the ciliated columnar epithelium that are found inside the oviduct, the ventricles of the brain, the spinal canal, the respiratory passages. All of those surfaces bear cilia, which are constantly beating in a rhythmic movement to allow movement of materials in or outside or into a particular surface. And these ones, every time they set up these currents, they allow materials to move from one location to another. So those are the functions of the epithelia. I talked about them in the first video, but I thought since some of you might have not watched them, we could do well to watch them here. Let's talk about connective tissue. So connective tissue are derived from the embryonic mesoderm. Remember, I talked about the first three germ layers, the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. We always talk about those 3 layers, but the connective tissue are derived from the mesoderm. So in connective tissue, the cells are scattered in a matrix of fibrous proteins and glycoproteins, which are attached to a basement membrane. The matrix determines the nature of connective tissue. And so, for example, we are going to see that we have dense connective tissue, adipose tissue, areolar tissue, we have bone, we even have blood. Now, these are very diverse types of tissue. However, they all serve the function of joining one tissue or one organ to another organ. So we are going to see, for example, blood is one tissue that is found all over the body that connects different tissues together. And when we are going to see bones, for example, serving the purpose of support, and we are going to see different types of tissue serving different types of functions. Some of the major functions of connective tissue is binding tissues together. So they bind the various tissues together, like the skin with the muscle and muscles with bones. So we know about ligaments, we know tendons. Connective tissue binds bone and muscle and skin together. Apart from that, it is packing tissue. You're not simply made up of organs. In between the organs, in between the lungs and the heart, we have connective tissue. In between the different organs, we have connective tissue, which perform like shock absorbers. So they perform like bags around the body organs. Areolar tissue protects the body against wounds and infections. As we're going to see, we are going to discover it has macrophages, it has antibodies in it that serve the purpose of protection. Adipose tissue stores fats and insulates the body against heat loss. Connective tissue is a major supportive tissue of the body. It is composed of bones, cartilage, which provides the bones with a supportive framework. Okay, and then blood, hemopoietic tissue produces blood. Lymphatic tissue provides immunity by producing antibodies, similar to the work of areola, which is protection from infection. And then connective tissue separates the body organs so that they do not interfere with each other's activities. Imagine if the intestines got mixed up with the kidneys, and it would be a mess. But because of connective tissue, every organ is particularly located where it is supposed to be located. And then connective tissue protects blood vessels and organs where they enter or where they leave organs. Now, connective tissue, like I said earlier, occurs in different forms, which can be divided into 2. We have connective tissue proper, which is then divided into loose and dense connective tissue. And then we have special connective tissue, which include skeletal tissue, that is cartilage and bone. And then we have blood. So those are the 2 types of connective tissue that give us 4 different subsets of connective tissue. Connective tissue proper, which gives us loose and dense connective tissue, and then special connective tissue, which gives us skeletal tissue and blood tissue. Let's talk about loose connective tissue. Loose connective tissue consists of 3 tissues: areolar tissue, adipose tissue, and reticular tissue. Areolar connective tissue is the most abundant type of connective tissue, which is found all over the body. It is found beneath the skin, connecting organs together and filling up spaces between adjacent tissues. Areolar connective tissue consists of a gelatinous glycoprotein matrix. So as you can see in this picture here, we have a matrix that has other submolecules and cells embedded within it. So it consists of a gelatinous glycoprotein matrix, or what we call the ground substance. It contains 2 types of protein fibers and 4 types of cells. So the protein fibers, we have the collagen fibers, these black ones here, and then we have the elastic fibers. Now, of course, these are not the true colors. This is just a diagram to show you what they look like. If you're a student, you will do well to know how to draw that sketch, because anytime in your exams you might be required to draw and label it. So you should know that inside here we have 2 types of fibers. We have the collagen fibers and we have the elastic fibers. The collagen fibers are white fibers that form wavy bundles that run parallel to each other, and then they are not branched. Okay, they are flexible, but they are inelastic. And then the elastic fibers are thin yellow fibers. So the collagen fibers are thick, as you can see. So these are two, this one, and this one. And then there's this one also. And they are thick, but while the elastic fibers are actually thin yellow fibers, and these ones are highly branched. And they form a network in the matrix. They are flexible, the elastic fibers are flexible and they are elastic. And their main function is to give areolar tissue strength and toughness. That is what we are talking about here. Their main function for the elastic fibers is to give areolar tissue strength and toughness. This makes the tissue be able to be flexible and to be elastic. However, the collagen fibers help the tissue not to tear in case it is put under pressure. So while the collagen fibers hold the integrity of the tissue, the elastic fiber allow the tissue to be elastic. Now, those are the fibers within. So we have the collagen fibers. These are these thick ones, and then we have these thin ones being our elastic fibers. The cells within the tissue are the fibroblasts. So the fibroblasts are long flattened cells. The fibroblasts are long flattened cells that are spindle shaped. I believe we will see them better here. So these are the fibroblasts here. They are long flattened shapes, so you can see them lying on the collagen fibers here. They are long flattened cells that are spindle shaped, and they contain an oval nucleus. They are generally closely applied to the fibers, but they migrate to the wounded tissue in case you have a wound, so that they can secrete more fibers in that region to seal off that injured area. Their function particularly is to secrete actually the fibers, both the collagen fibers and the elastic fibers. And then we have the macrophages. The macrophages are these big ones here. The macrophages here, they are large cells that are capable of movement actually by, like the amoeba. We know that amoeba move by pseudopodia, so they are capable of amoeboid movement. That is why sometimes they are called amoeboid cells. Their function is to engulf and ingest bacteria and other foreign particles. They are generally mobile, but sometimes they wander to areas of bacterial invasions. So therefore, anytime you have an infection, it is these guys that actually go there and feed on the bacteria. This is a good example of a fibroblast. As you can see here, it is elongated, it is flattened, and it has an oval nucleus. And then we have the mast cells. The mast cells are amoeboid cells which are oval-shaped, and they contain a granular cytoplasm. So this is what we mean. It has granules inside. They contain a granular cytoplasm. They are found in abundance close to blood cells, and their functions, there is the secretion of the matrix. They secrete the matrix. They secrete an anticoagulant called heparin. Now, anticoagulant means whenever we have this anticoagulant here, blood is not going to clot. So because of the mast cells, because of heparin, our blood does not become solid inside our bodies. And finally, their function is also they secrete another substance called histamine that gives us the effects of allergies. In case you get an allergy, that allergy is going to be caused by that itching of the skin is going to be caused by histamine. The fourth type of cell are the fat cells. These ones are filled by lipid droplets. Filled by lipid droplets, the cytoplasm and the nucleus of a fat cell are confined to the margins of their periphery. Awesome. So what are the functions of areolar tissue? The areolar tissue binds tissues and organs together. They serve as packing tissue between the filling of spaces between adjacent tissues. So in between the tissues, we have areolar tissue, which serves to separate the different tissues, connective tissue together, to separate the different organs from interacting with each other. And then they support the various tissues. They provide tissues they resist strain and displacement, but they also protect the body against infections. Why? Because of the macrophages that we talked about, the macrophages and the mast cells here. They have that purpose of fighting against invaders. Awesome. So Let's talk about adipose tissue, and then this video is getting too long, so let's talk about adipose tissue, and then we shall save dense tissue for the next video. Adipose tissue is a type of connective tissue that has a reduced matrix and contains very large fat cells. This is an example of fat cells, these big globulets here. Very large and large fat cells that are very many actually. Adipose tissue functions to store energy. So when you go on a fast, like a 30, 40-day fast, within the first 3 days, your carbohydrate storage is going to be used up, and then the body is going to begin feasting on this adipose tissue for energy. So adipose tissue functions to store energy, to insulate the body. That is why you eventually begin to feel cold. After 7 days, your body begins to feel very cold. Why? Because your adipose tissue that was giving you heat has been used up. It serves the purpose of insulation and also serves the purpose of shock absorption to delicate organs. For example, the kidney. It also covers, it is found beneath the skin, and there's plenty of it in the buttocks. And adipose tissue occurs in two forms. We have the white and the brown adipose tissue. The white adipose tissue appears white because of the accumulation of fats. And then the yellow adipose tissue is the one that is common in young animals, young mammals, and some hibernating mammals. Its function is temperature regulation. So let's talk about reticular tissue. Reticular tissue is very thin and is very branched. This one is a fabric that joins connective tissue to adjacent tissues, and it provides a supporting framework for organs. It is abundant in areas where we have the lymphatic system, and it provides a supporting framework for organs like the lymph nodes, the spleen, and the liver. So when we come next time, we are going to be talking about the dense connective tissue. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe and share to another student who might be blessed and who can profit from listening to such videos. Thank you very much.